At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The 3 Down Greencast is brought to you by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company. New taproom now open at Sass Drive and Cameron in Regina. Well, welcome to the 3 Down Greencast with myself, Joel Gasson, and John Fraser. And we've kind of been thrown for a bit of a loop as we had this great opening segment planned. As you know, here on the 3 Down Greencast, we generally don't like to rant for the sake of ranting. There's no rant of the week brought to you by Joe Smith Plumbing or anything like that. You know, it's a little forced, I feel, at times, but in sports media in general right now. And we like to rant when it really feels like it's really deserved, so it feels like it means something.
Yes.
And in this case, we were all prepared. Well, John was very much prepared to go probably on the rant of his life, which is saying something if you know John's history of ranting on podcasts.
It's fair.
About something the Winnipeg Blue Bombers should have done. It didn't look like they were going to do until the last minute, but then they did in fact trade for a quarterback, and as the Bombers do, they just went ahead and ruined everything. So thanks, Winnipeg.
Yeah, thanks, Winnipeg, for ruining all our fun and actually going out and getting a decent quarterback that you so desperately need to maybe keep my slim hopes of finally seeing my team win a Grey Cup alive. I was prepared. If they would have stayed idle at the deadline, I might have had to record this outside, because I don't know if there is a room in my house where I wouldn't wake either of my two sons from screaming at the top of my lungs over how frustrated I was as a Bomber fan.
Yeah, and I guess that's entirely fair. Like, you would have been that scene from The Simpsons where Homer swears so loud that it keeps cutting out and more and more things keep happening. That yes. Probably would have been you.
oh yeah. There may have been a noise. I would have felt bad for my neighbors. My neighbors to the south are new Canadians. This is their very first time in the country, and they've almost always have their windows open. And I could only imagine what they would have thought of this lunatic outside screaming at the top of his lungs at 9:44 about and
when
only
it's like
hearing one side of
out.
our conversation. Exactly, and just screaming and swearing and cursing. My one neighbor that I know pretty well that lives across the alley, shout out to Ralph, he would have got it. He would have heard me swearing about the Bombers. But it could have been a terrifying experience. So the Bombers did, in fact, ruin perhaps a live arrest on the 3 Down Nation Greencast, or at least a warning for a noise complaint as I scream in my backyard over frustration. But yes, the Bombers actually going out and doing something unlike everybody else on CFL Trade Deadline Day. It was, again, to quote The Simpsons, it's like the Halloween episode where Homer's urge to kill rising, urge to kill rising, urge to kill falling, rising, falling. So urge to kill, urge to yell about the Bombers is low. I've also had about 4 beer tonight too, so that helps.
Yeah, and I mean, this is really inconsiderate of the Bombers, considering it really should come down to our content and our clicks. I mean, that's
right.
We are clickbait, so that's really, the most important thing for 3 Down Nation, right? So the Bombers really should be looking out for us, and really, a live arrest of John Fraser on a podcast really would have got us some listens, I'm sure. So. Oh
yeah, no, we would have been that would have been a viral moment, and then all the extra clickbaity sites could have been man podcast in backyard. You won't believe what happens at the 3-minute mark.
Saskatchewan man.
That's right.
So yeah, we will get into the trade deadline in a little bit, kind of the big picture on the amount of nothingness that generally speaking happened and continues to happen, and why nothing generally happens at the CFL trade deadline, and maybe why we should all lower our expectations about it a little bit.
Oh yeah.
We're also going to talk, of course, about the big Rider win over the Bombers and how they've put themselves in the driver's seat for something that, honestly, I didn't think was possible at the start of the season. So I'm going to do a little bit of a mea culpa on that one a little bit. We're going to talk about potentially the loss of Cam Judge, and we're going to also do a little bit of a look around the league a little bit and see kind of where the cards are falling as we head into the final 4 weeks of the regular season. And we head towards the most wonderful time of the year, the Grey Cup playoffs.
Yes.
But as always, John, before we get all that rolling, since you've already spilled it all over your recording spot today, what's in the glass this week?
Well, what's in the glass? I wish there was more of it, and it didn't explode when I opened it. Other night, I walked into the Sobeys liquor store, and in the beer cooler, there's the single cans for a ridiculously discounted price.
Yeah.
And most of the time, it's whatever cheap vodka seltzer that all the kids are drinking these days, or some, shit cider that is way too sweet that nobody wants. But today, like a blessing from the heavens, like a blessing from Zach Collaros upon the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, there's a couple cans of Bose in there. Bose, as we've mentioned them before on the podcast.
B-A-U apostrophe
yes.
S, not like B-O-H, to be clear.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I ain't drinking Bo. Mr. Craft Beer Man is not drinking Bohemian on this podcast. I'm sure I'd be banned for that. But from kind of out in your neck of the woods, kind of Eastern Ontario there, having the Good Time Session IPA.
Yeah, solid beer.
It's a fun can. Got big dominoes falling over. The other thing I like, for a guy that likes a nightcap or a pint or two, because I love beer almost every single night, only 4%, but with all the IPA taste. So
yeah, that's what a session IPA is. Yeah,
yeah, it's good. It's very good. It tastes good. It's nice and crisp. It almost reminds me of a Fat Tug. I know I've talked about Fat Tug before. Without the bite of that 8% alcohol, which of course Fat Tug drunk is a totally different kind of drunk. So I'm sure when I'm staying with you here in a couple weeks and we record this actually in the same room for the first time ever after too many beers, maybe we'll have some Fat Tugs that night.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, Bo's solid choice. They're from Van Vliet Hill, Ontario, kind of in between Ottawa and Montreal, so they kind of cover both markets pretty well, and they're widely available across the country now, I believe. They're a cool little story of what was once a family-owned brewery and needed cash to expand rather than selling out. They sold shares to the employees, which was kind of cool. Yeah, so
kind of like Great West up here in Saskatoon.
Yeah, a little bit like that. Me, I'm staying within the province. I am giving in to the apparent arrival of winter, at least for now. They've been staring at me for a while, and I finally gave in today and bought them. Plus, I'm feeling a little sniffly under the weather, and sometimes a nice dark beer I feel helps a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going with the Robust Porter from Blackbridge. Just a nice, dark, roasty son of a gun that just hits all those notes you would expect from such a beer.
Yes, I have a can of oatmeal stout waiting in the basement. I'm still not willing to accept that winter is upon us just yet.
Yeah, I mean, we might. There might be a bit of a turnaround. We might get back to 10 again at some point or something. But I think for the most part in English, the good times of summer are probably over. But that just means the beer goes from a little fruity or a little lighter to a little darker and richer, which is of course nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely not.
You may argue that there's something wrong with the CFL Trade Deadline, as it came and went on Wednesday with pretty much no fanfare other than the eventual trade of Zach Collaros to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. It was kind of rumored earlier in the day. Kind of sounds like it was the last hill Jim Popp was willing to die on before getting canned in Toronto for some reason. Anyway, we'll get to that in a bit maybe. But this more comes around to the fact that I see a lot of tweets from a lot of people talking about how boring the CFL trade deadline is, and seen tweets from specific older media type guys who were like, well, how come half the league can move in free agency, but nothing happens on CFL trade deadline day? I was like, well, let's take a step back here.
He is just the worst. Can I just go ahead and say that I have a story about that media scribe that I believe I've told you that I'm not going to share in the podcast, but it involves intentionally ruining an interview with me so he could feel like he had the exclusive, and I've had no respect for him ever since.
Yeah, so it's just I think we're so hockeyized, to make up a word, in this country, though, we're so used to watching the NHL trade deadline and there are 36 hours of coverage on the sports networks, and how many, maybe not so much big deals these days, but just the total, the general quantity of deals that get done. And we're like, why doesn't this happen in the CFL? Well, I mean, it doesn't really happen that much in the NFL either. Like, as far as I can remember, the NFL trade deadline isn't a big deal. Yeah, there's trades in baseball at the deadline and in basketball, but it's a very different sport, and it's hard in football to plug a guy into your lineup with a few weeks to go. In hockey, in basketball, and baseball, sure, you can bring this guy in and they can learn kind of your system and the way you do things on the fly. You can't really do that in football. If you bring in like a big star offensive lineman and you throw him in there right away and expect him to perform, he's probably just going to get run over because he doesn't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's that part in play, and lots of other factors too. At this point in the season, I imagine probably every team in the CFL, maybe except for Ottawa this year, probably spends to the cap. And their budget is set, and yes, there's only 4 games left, so it's not a lot of money per se that you have to add to the cap, but it's still difficult to maneuver the cap at this point. So, sure, there's probably teams like Toronto and Ottawa that are willing to unload players, but they don't really want roster players in return. So, how are you going to make that work salary cap-wise on top of that? So, there's this, football reasons, there's guys learning the system, and, if the players that are available on the market are even a fit for what you do is a whole entirely other thing. It's again not like hockey where you just plug a player in and figure out where he fits. You need to know, so this guy's a middle linebacker, he's good, but does he fit what we do with our middle linebacker? There's all kinds of questions that just surround it compared to what you see in other sports. So the CFL trade deadline isn't a big deal because of that, and it's the same pretty much probably across professional football.
Yeah, no, I would agree. The NFL, I even remember, I watch a lot of NFL Network and a lot of those shows from down there because I just love football. They don't even do anything really special. They kind of did the same thing that we were doing on the website today, a live blog with Twitter updates from each one of the teams. But I do have an idea. I have a great idea here, though, if people want to get it spiced up, Joel. And it involves you and me. Mm-hmm. I think what we need okay, we'll live stream it on 3 Down Nation. And we'll have Dunk, obviously, because he's Mr. Insider, and he'll be like an octopus man working like 3 different phones, trying to bring up scoops. Haji and Smith can host in the 3 Down Nation studio, and then they'll cut back to you and me, and all we'll be doing the whole day, if nothing breaks, is tasting different beers. And we'll see how good the beer reviews get throughout the day, right? So they can come back and say, well, here's a tweet from Montreal. Looks like they're not doing anything either. Now back to Joel and John. Joel, I'm so full, but I opened up another beer. This one's called the... Yeah, I think it would be ratings gold. And Dunk and Haji and Smith, let's make it happen. I'll travel down to Regina, and you and I can live stream this from your new place and just get unequivocally shit-faced for the day, because that would be the most interesting thing.
We would probably have to do it in the garage or the basement then, just for like easy cleanup's sake.
Fair enough.
You can barely open a beer tonight. I can't imagine if after like an entire day of nothing happening at the CFL trade deadline.
Well, I opened up number 2 without. I was a little worried there. I opened it up slowly while you were talking in case it exploded all over my bedroom that I record in, just like the first one. But yeah, to your point, it's such a tough sport to work guys in, and I mean,
especially with such little time. If they moved it up earlier in the year, if it was at like the halfway point of the season, maybe something happens.
Well, that's even, you and I were talking before we started recording. Now you're the Bombers. They're saying all the things that Chris Streveler's going to be guy. He's going to be the guy. He's not going to be the guy. We know that. It's probably going to be a 2-quarterback system at best, like with Glenn and Bridge with the Saskatchewan did a couple years ago. But even at that, Winnipeg only has 3 games left. Mm-hmm. To work a brand new quarterback in with a brand new system, who's now learning his 3rd system all within a year. And
Paul LaPolice's is probably one of the more complicated in the league. In a league filled with vanilla offenses in general, Paul LaPolice, and we'll get into this in a bit, other than last week, generally steps outside of that box.
Yeah, 100%. So you're right. It's not an easy thing. And I mean, baseball's an individual sport disguised as a team sport. You're right with hockey, and yeah, it's a tougher thing to do in football. And I think, minus a couple key positions, one football player generally has less of an impact on a team than, the sum of all the parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you don't see a ton of player movement. And let's be serious too. If you're Winnipeg, if you're Kyle Walters right now, there's a good chance Hamilton's not going to trade with you because you might be the crossover team. Same with Montreal.
Well, they're not going to be the crossover team. Edmonton's not catching them. I'm pretty confident.
Fair. No, that's fair enough. Yes, Edmonton is a fraud team, but still, even in that remote possibility, you're not. It's not like Montreal would entertain the thought of say moving Antonio Pipkin because you're probably you could potentially see them in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Hamilton is not going to move anybody.
Well, and I've seen lots of people talking about McLeod Bethel Thompson, and it's like, well, why would Toronto make that move? He is, despite his flaws, he still has a lot of touch. He's still shown flashes at times this year.
Oh, 100%.
Considering where Toronto is, he's worth hanging on to for now to see if maybe you can develop him further next year.
Well, and I mean, it's very obvious that James Franklin, who couldn't be given away by the Argos, is no longer in the conversation to be the starting quarterback there. It is a McLeod Bethel Thompson.
Speaking of James Franklin, who is someone, I believe, a couple years ago when everyone was talking about him going to the Riders, said he hadn't proven anything yet.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were kind of upset about that. Who was that? I don't remember. Some guy. I don't know. Anyway.
Weird. Wonder who that guy was.
I don't know.
Regardless, going back and adding more to the Joel scoreboard from many years back, but if you're Kyle Walters, you know damn well that Calgary is not entertaining the thought of giving you Nick Arbuckle.
No.
You know damn well that.
Well, they need to put Bo on the injured list again at some point to save salary, right?
Well, apparently, right? That's the only reason that Bo wouldn't. It's not like the guy went and saw a shoulder specialist. It was very clearly hurt and clearly
has to agree to go on the 6th game. None of that's possible. No.
No, none of that. And it's not like Bo, from everything we know, was very much a competitor. This is a guy who said no to an NFL job because they said, "Yeah, you're going to come in and hold the clipboard," and he's like, "No."
Well, according to him, the team turned him down because they didn't want to cause controversy.
Well, that's exactly it, right? I mean,
you're too good for our backup spot. What?
What? Exactly. You're too good for a backup spot. We'll sign you, but you have to be okay with holding a clipboard all year. And he's like, no. So you really think a guy like that is going to willingly go on the 6-game list because you paid him too much?
Yeah.
Like, oh God, you know what? I do love Rod Peterson. I do. I consider him a friend. That was just a bad take.
Yeah.
That was like Fraser levels bad. That was just.
It was him seeking attention again. It's what he does well.
Fair enough. But so now once you eliminate all the West Division teams, the 2 playoff teams in the East, even that might have a surplus of quarterbacks, I look at a guy like Antonio Pipkin.
They could have maybe got like Dom Davis back or something, but that's not going to help you.
Well, that's exactly it. That's why you have so many teams in the CFL making the playoffs. You still have, you're an 8-team league that 6 teams make the playoffs.
A 9-team league, but yes.
Pardon.
It's easy to understand that Ottawa isn't
clearly
really,
I've had too many of those beers, but
it's really.
Yes.
I mean, I understand your thing because Toronto and Ottawa are like half a team this year.
It's true. That's fair. And I mean, Toronto might get relegated and let Laval come up and play for next year, but there's just not that spread. So the trade deadline is not going to be anything. And realistically, like I could have maybe seen Duke Williams going someplace out of Toronto, but
Darrell Walker, yes.
Darrell Walker.
Duke Williams is in Buffalo.
Is in Buffalo scoring touchdowns and probably playing some relevant minutes.
Any other corrections I can make for you tonight?
Oh, wow. Probably a few more, Joel. I am clearly, this is my finest moment right now. But I thought about Duke Williams because I was thinking about picking him up on one of my fantasy teams earlier today, actually. Okay. And I think that's why he's stuck in my mind. Yeah, okay. Either way, I would just go full Don Cherry and just start saying guys' names wrong, right? But Darrell Walker was maybe the only other guy. But again, going back to your point, we even look at Jordan Williams-Lambert. This is a guy that was in Saskatchewan last year with the same offensive coordinator. And they were still like, okay, we're going to give you a couple weeks to figure things out again here, right? So even if you were to go out and get Darrell Walker, you're still bringing him up to speed with 3 or 4 games left in the season, and it's not an easy thing to do in football. So, yeah, I still say we start the web show on the for 3 Down Nation with the live blog, and you and I will just get shit-faced on company dime.
We might not be able to get company dime, but we might be able to work our sponsor a little bit to help us out on that one.
Oh, Pile of Bones does make lots of different beers, and we could try them all in one sitting.
We could just simulcast from their new tap room on Sass Drive in Cameron in Regina, blocks from the new Mosaic Stadium.
We could do that. We should probably do that when I'm down there for the Heritage Classic. That would make sense.
Oh, we're going there for sure. Like, there's no question about that.
Oh, fantastic. We might as well just settle in and live there. We might as well set up a tent.
As long as you're okay with living off tacos, then. I mean,
have you met me? Of course I'm okay with living off tacos. Tacos and beer. I would be the happiest man alive.
So we're obviously talking a lot about the trade deadline, and the big deal, I guess the only deal at the trade deadline, came about because the Riders exposed the Bombers in a way that they've been exposed a little bit at times since. It seemed to really spiral for them once it was official that Matt Nichols was out for the year.
Yeah.
I don't know if that took a little bit of something, a bit of the mystery around it away a little bit, but now that he's done, it feels like the Strevelation has gone very, very wrong, and that's what forced the trade, and the Riders, I think, really exposed that in a big way, and it clearly showed that they learned from the Labor Day Classic and the Banjo Bowl, because, and I believe, and there was there's some people, I didn't see the game live, I watched it later, and there was a lot of people talking about, they didn't think it was that entertaining of a game. I thought both defenses actually played very well.
Very well.
The Rider defense got a lot more help from the Bomber offense and the Bomber defense of the Rider offense, but regardless, both defenses still played very well, and I think that's important to note. But man, that Bomber offense had nothing, and there was this you never really got the thinking that they were really going to do much of anything, and the book just appears to be out on them now, at least the way they were doing it, and that's why this trade had to be made. So you can force a quarterback in there at times who can actually throw the ball, even though he can't throw it deep, he can at least throw the ball.
Yes.
And because it was first down, they had they were covering Andrew Harris, they had 7 in the box, and to everyone else, the other guys on the field, to their credit, if that ball was thrown to the screen like it was quite often, they rallied quickly to the football and made the tackle, something they didn't always do earlier in the season. So a ton of credit to Jason Shivers and that group to getting them ready for that game. And they just made sure that, okay, they're not running on first down. We're going to put the Bombers in, second and long, and then we're bringing heat, and they couldn't stop it. If they forced quick throws, and they got in Chris Trevor's face all night, and there was just absolutely nothing that they could do about it.
No, you're absolutely right. It was the Saskatchewan Roughriders just put out on tape a masterful performance on how you stop Chris Streveler and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I think too, you mentioned that something seemed to change when they knew Matt Nichols was out, and to me that changed. Again, I watch every Rider game, I watch every Bomber game. It seemed as though they were more interested in protecting Chris Streveler. Rather than letting him, like in the Labor Day Classic and the Banjo Bowl, just letting him basically take 1, maybe 2 reads and run if he needed to. They seem to be forced, and a large part of that was what Saskatchewan did with limiting the gains, but it was just like, since they knew Matt Nichols was out, they had to turn him into a pocket passer, and they had the regular season to do so. And clearly he is not capable of that whatsoever. I mean, again, Saskatchewan is a very, very, very tough test. Seeing the best defense in the league 3 times in some of your, most pressure-packed starts you've had as a young start in this league was exactly why they had to go out and get Zach Caleros, right? They just need something, and we were talking about it, that they almost need a Kevin Glenn, Brandon Bridge situation that allows Chris Streveler to go out and be Chris Streveler, basically, the league's 3rd best running back, right? So it was impressive, though. Like, this was all hyperbole aside, the winner of that game, as you and I had discussed, is the inside track for first in the West, and the Riders came out and did their job and did it spectacularly. The offense weren't lighting the world on fire against a good Bomber defense for good chunks of the night, but
yeah, and that's fair. That Bomber defense is going to do their thing still. As much as they were torched for a few weeks, you had to imagine that they would eventually get it back to some degree of order.
Yeah, exactly, and they did, and they kind of kept things in check there against the Riders, but they're able to prevail, make some slight adjustments. Again, I was just so impressed with Cody Fajardo. Like, give that man his 4-year contract. Like, he wants to stay in Saskatchewan. He wants to stay long term. coming up big in these pressure-packed games against a rival with first place on the line and just looking, his wife's in the stand. He still just looked cool as a cucumber for most of that game. He still had a couple moments that he went, Gah, but it again, he continues to look like the guy, and he was able to overcome that Bomber D. Now, the question is, now you have the next biggest game of the season coming up here as they take on the Calgary Stampeders.
Yeah, and this will be the test for this offense because they've lost since starting 1-2. They've lost one game, and that was to the Calgary Stampeders. Well, they lost two games. So they basically the Banjo Bowl was what it was. That was kind of one of those wash away games. So in games where they lost to Calgary, and that was that was a moment for this team, and I think that was a moment. And I wrote it at the time. Sometimes you need to get your ass kicked to figure it out, and I think. Yeah. I think that was part of what happened against Calgary, and we've seen it since. And what's always been most impressive to me about Cody Fajardo and this offense is, they're not the most dynamic offense in the world. Rarely are they going to go out against a good team and win by putting up 45 points. That's just not what they do. Could they do it if they had to? Probably. In the right circumstances, it might evolve into that, but that's not what they do. But what they do well is when they need that touchdown. When they need the drive, they tend to get it. Yes. And that's what we saw. We've seen it numerous times throughout the season. And they're just battle-tested. They've been through so many ups and downs on both sides of the ball over the place that nothing really phases them, I don't think. And that's going to be key coming into the playoffs where, if you're coming down to a drive, especially when you're at home, whether it's in the West semifinal or the West final, you have belief in this offense right now. Even if they've done nothing all game, even if it's at the 12, you're down 12-10 in the final 2 minutes of the game, you're like, no, they've done nothing for so long, but I know the Cody Fajardo, they're down 15-10 to make it interesting because you need a touchdown.
Of course. Cody
Fajardo has the ability, despite of anything that may have happened all game, to get that drive when he needs it. And he got a little help last week because Shaq Evans shed it and had a 61-yard touchdown. But still, They still look poised in that drive even before Evans got free for the touchdown. And that's where that's to me is the biggest difference between this offense is an offense we've seen under Stephen McAdoo and this team. Even the year before last when they had the Glenn Bridge thing going and it was, the offense is pretty good, but there was still something you felt was missing. And I think that it factor is there for this offense this year. It's not going to go down as one of the greatest offenses in Rider history by any stretch of the imagination, but you can trust it to get a drive, to either get that touchdown or the field goal when you absolutely need it.
And that's true. That goes all the way back to Labor Day and even some of the early struggles last week against Winnipeg. You're kind of there's not that sense of doom, right? When the team looks, so the offense starts to sputter and things, you're like, okay, they're going to get it figured out, which I think is essential. I mean, to me, I as much faith as I have in the Riders, even if they go down, I think they need to come out and punch Calgary in the mouth.
That would be a huge message to send for sure.
Oh, and I think they need to send that message because, I mean, if you and everybody's talking about the season series and stuff like that, but thanks to the favor that the Montreal Alouettes did for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, you'd be 2 games clear of Calgary with a victory here. So it's massive. You could put it on cruise control for the last 3 weeks, right? You'd be 2 games up with 3 weeks left to go, 2 against the fraud that are the Edmonton Eskimos.
The other against BC.
Again, this is huge. And now you're facing a Calgary team with Bo Levi back that's starting to get healthy. Don Jackson's back. All these guys that are clearly tying up the salary cap and had to go on the 6-game injured list are back because they can pay them now.
If by some miracle they could win the game by more than 30 points and take that tiebreaker, then they've effectively locked up the West.
Calgary since 2001 has lost 1 game by 28 points or more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Riders, again, if they can pull it off, if they could somehow just kick the shit out of the Calgary Stampeders, which I don't see it happening.
No,
I see the Riders winning. No, I see the Riders winning. I see them putting themselves in a powerful position to take the rest of the West, the West Division, especially when, again, you've got a couple games against Edmonton to finish up the year and, a team that probably should fire their head coach now, but won't, obviously.
It's a thought that crossed my mind. I texted you at the time. I'm like, do they try to salvage something right now and just do something desperate like that?
right? I did not disagree because obviously that team has quit playing for Jason Moss, and they are, and we've talked about this, how you can see the personalities of teams follow their coaches, and this year's Riders are chill, they're having fun, they're confident and everything like that. Meanwhile, the Edmonton Eskimos are just an angry shit show. So, yeah, you can tell that, and that's who you get to finish against. So, yeah, this is the biggest 2 games in the Saskatchewan season, and in a position that, quite frankly, especially when we thought Zach Collaros was going to be the starting quarterback, neither you or I thought they would be in this position this late in the season.
No, and this is where I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong, and this is one of those situations where heading into the season, I wrote about it, and we both talked about it on this podcast, where this was probably one of the more interesting pre-seasons in Rider history, where we didn't really know where things are going to lie after such upheaval after the departure of Chris Jones, more than anything. With a new head coach, a new general manager, first time in the job really, and the whole picture. And so I remember I said anything between second in the West and last in the West would not surprise me. So the only way I could be wrong is if they finish first in the West. And there certainly is, different things that need to fall into place for that to happen still. But the chance is there. So I'm willing to say at this point, you know what? I was wrong about this team. And there's nothing wrong with that. It happens. I'm paid to have an opinion on this website. So that's what I did. And it didn't seem like an unreasonable take at the time. And I still don't really think it is. But the fact is that this is actually, a really good football team that has come together so well. I think under a lot of props deserves to go to Craig Dickinson, who in my opinion is definitely in the conversation for Coach of the Year in the CFL. And has brought them with a shot of having, being finishing first in the West, which is something that, frankly, doesn't really happen a whole lot around here. It is rarefied air for this team to really have a shot at hosting the West Final. Because even the last time they won the Grey Cup, they finished second in the West and had to go through Calgary. So really, this is something that doesn't happen very often, and it really needs to be noted just how well this team has played to have that opportunity.
No, and you're absolutely right. The defense has turned into what we thought it was. And yes, we both can admit that we're wrong, unlike lots of other sports people. If I couldn't admit that I was wrong, I would probably never speak on a podcast, because I once thought that Johnny Manziel was going to lead the Tiger Cats to the Grey Cup. So I've still got that on my resume. You're right, Dickinson. I think Dickinson, he won't get considered. He'll get a nomination, but I don't think he'll get considered for Coach of the Year after Kahari Jones and what's been happening out east with those 2 teams, right, with Hamilton and Montreal. But
of course,
it's you're right. Like, he's very quietly turned this into a very, very good football team that I think the doubters have been silenced a little bit. I don't hear as much of that in Saskatchewan. I don't hear as much of the, they haven't beat anybody, rabba-labba-dub-dub. No, Edmonton hasn't beaten anybody. Saskatchewan has beaten good football teams, and I believe. Wait, no. What's Vanstone predicting?
I don't know.
Vanstone predicting a win?
I haven't seen yet. It might be a little. I haven't seen, to be honest. It's usually at the bottom of the Brennan Tammon column, and I haven't seen that one yet. So.
Okay, so fantastic. So whatever Vanstone picks, I need to pick as well to cancel out the Vanstone pick. This is the math we figured out a couple weeks ago.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah. I was just about to predict, make my prediction for the game. Now I realize, for the sake of Rider fans, I need to wait till Vanstone makes his pick and cancel it out.
Well, we're not re-recording this, so
exactly, math and stuff. Well, I don't know. I'll just tweet it.
Okay, I guess that's fair.
Tweet at this. He might still follow me. I don't know. He probably. I feel like the Vanstone probably gave me a sympathy follow and then probably unfollowed me a couple weeks later. Let's check this.
Seems probable. Yeah, I don't know.
He still follows me. All right, I will just quote tweet him when he makes his prediction and cancel it out.
Sounds good. But the interesting thing to me, and I want to go back to the game against Winnipeg a little bit, was the decision Craig Dickinson made to challenge a reception by Shaq Evans that was originally called incomplete on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some, I saw some chatter on the old Twitter about, so he's challenging this reception to still attempt the field goal. And I was like, really? Just think about this for a second. Basically read the room, which is basically the game here.
Yes.
A field goal in that spot effectively sealed the game for the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
100%.
It would have made it a 2-point converted touchdown game, so they would have gone up 8 after that field goal.
Yeah.
Which no one believed the Bombers were going to score a touchdown and a 2-point conversion at that point. It would have been...
Right.
And then you still would have had overtime. Or more time left on the clock to take the lead. So it was 100% in my belief that Craig Dickinson challenged that because it made a 49-yard field goal, which Brett Lowther can make. There's no question about it. A 34-yard field goal, which is considerably easier. And
which is automatic for Lowther.
Essentially, yeah. So when it's such a tight defensive football game where points is at a premium, and ironically, John Ryan's Rouges that were unfortunate bounces actually worked out for them in this game in terms of the scoreboard. That 3 points is huge. So, yeah, he was still attempting a field goal, but that was 100%, even though it was going to be his last challenge of the night, the right decision to challenge that call, because effectively that field goal sealed them the game. So anyone who thinks, why would you do that? That's why he did that, and that is 100% a smart football coach, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, and you and I are very much from the new school of thought. We very much align our views with our friend Derek Taylor, thinking about stats and math, and the team should go for it on 2 more often and go for it on 3rd and short more often. And that's how we think. So
occasionally old school thinking comes into play, though. And I think that was one of them.
It does. Well, but that's right. But I mean, still, I think there's been fewer moments like through this whole season. We haven't really talked about Craig Dickinson.
Yeah, I mean, because it's been covered up by a lot of wins.
A little bit? It's
been covered up by wins. In a lot of my columns, I've talked a fair bit about some weird decisions he's made from time to time. I think over the course of the season, as a rookie head coach, he's learned from them, which is a really good and important sign. But a lot of his other, kind of weird decisions, he's been able to overcome by the fact that they won. And then when asked about it after the game, he actually admitted error, unlike what a lot of other coaches don't do. So I think that kind of takes the heat off it, because he comes out, he's like, yeah, my bad, I shouldn't have made that decision. And then we're all just like, oh, okay, moving on.
Well, that's fair. You're right. There's no second guessing if a guy comes out and just says, yeah, I effed up and I shouldn't have, and I won't do it again. And he continues to prove that he won't do it again. So, and that is one thing I really like about him, some humility in a football coach, which is so rare. Mm-hmm. So rare. I've interviewed so many coaches, and it's so rare. Oh dear God, so rare.
Some of them just in this
coaches
province
in
alone.
General. Yeah. That'll be if we ever like our friends at Two and Out, who are now selling out live podcast recordings. If we ever get in a room with like 4 people, maybe then I'll spill the beans on some of the egos of some of the coaches.
Yeah. Maybe that would be an off mic show. We do like shut down Fullcast Live, but the portion where the mics turn off is when we talk about that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, and boy, would we have stories. And see, we could tease that, and we still get 6 people.
Yeah, probably something like that. we would probably just hold it at a bar that would just be busy anyway, so it looks like they came to see us, but didn't actually.
Yeah, we better not sell tickets like the boys at Two and Out, because we ain't gonna sell shit.
No, none whatsoever. On a more serious note, this game against the Riders against Calgary is obviously a huge one, as we've talked about, but they've been dealt a bit of a blow now, as Cameron Judge is in very all likelihood not going to play in this game. And this is a guy that we talked to, he's had a weird career in Saskatchewan. He gets drafted, and then there was, he had a bit of a slow start, and then there was a whole thing where we weren't sure if he's actually going to keep playing or not, and then he eventually came back after his injury, and then he's just been on an uphill climb ever since then. And I think this year it's safe to say he's probably, and I know the Derek Moncrief fans are going to get their backs up a little bit on this one, I would say he's been their best linebacker this year, maybe one of their better defenders in general.
Yeah.
He doesn't make maybe as many splash plays. He's got to the quarterback a few times, which is nice, but he's a solid, and he's been everything that they thought he would be when they originally drafted him. And to lose that against Calgary at this point, I mean, I guess the break is, this isn't past years where there's the John Cornish that would take advantage of this, though I guess they have Solomon Almamim at least, but at the same time, this is going to be a significant loss for this football team heading into such a key game.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. He's a guy, if you watch him, he's not making the big fancy interceptions, but you can definitely tell that he will.
He did make a pretty slick one a couple weeks ago, though.
He did, actually. No, you're right. He's a good, solid football player. He's a Canadian, so you can do things with the ratio, and he's not Sam Hurl.
No.
So there's that. That's right. I don't think this is the longest we've gone in the squad without ripping Sam Hurl. It just felt natural,
he's
right?
been on special teams all year. We're just where he belongs.
He's been a beast on special teams all year, right? So, and it is nice to see. It looks like the reps aren't going to Sam Hurl so far this week, but you're right. And all of a sudden I had flashbacks to the John Cornish days where it just seems like Cornish could just run up the middle, even if you had 7 guys there, and just kind of like fall over and get 8 yards somehow every single time. So Don Jackson is not John Cornish. So it is a loss that will be felt by the Riders. But I don't think, I think with the weaknesses in that Calgary run game, I don't think it's going to be, quite the same as it was before.
No, not to the same level, but it is still. This is significant if it's more than a week. If we're talking about Cam Judge missing time as the season goes on, this is going to be a problem for them because he's that good. And it was Jamie Nye for the Green Zone wrote the commentary this week, or I guess wrote the commentary, but also spoke the commentary on the radio. I read it online because I don't listen to the radio anymore. Where there was, I guess on TSN they do the 7-Eleven top whatever every week where there's certain players of certain categories that they pick, and they picked this, I think it was 7 Canadians this week, and Cam Judge, it wasn't among the top 7 Canadians, but like Sean White and these other randos were. And like I'm not going to sit here and argue that Cam Judge should win most outstanding Canadian or anything like that. He should maybe be in kind of the periphery of the conversation, but you cannot tell me that Cam Judge is not for whatever, because it's the sponsor, a top 7. I would say he's arguably, at the very least, a top 10 Canadian in this league right now. He might even be one of the better linebackers, period, in this league right now, no matter the nationality.
Absolutely.
And he should have been in this conversation, and the fact that he was left off that list, and there's been a lot of those lists, a lot of them have been very weird to me. We haven't really talked a lot about them because it's this weird sponsored content by TSN and whatever. But this one is particularly like, really? Have you really been watching the games? And I don't think a lot of people really watch defense that closely, and how good Cam Judge has been, and how, as a Canadian, how effective he really is in that will linebacker spot. We've seen a lot of good Canadian Macs over the years, but to have him, he was good at Mac at the start of the year when Solomon Elamimian was still not playing. He was solid there, and then he moves to Will, and he's just as solid. Like, what more do you need out of this guy to get in recognition?
Well, that's because I feel like the unnamed sponsor power rankings are likely also just concocted by, the people that are, say, working at said unnamed sponsor.
I think I mentioned them earlier, so whatever.
That's right. Either way, it's probably just made up of people that are like, hey, random guy at 7-Eleven who's hyper annoying in the commercials, who do you think's the best Riders player? Who's good Canadians? Like, you're right. Those rankings have seemed so very random throughout the entire year.
Kind of like this program.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah. No, we're all over the map all the time.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.